She lives her life audaciously and believes in the power of reinvention. This week we speak to Waithera Ng'ang'a, the head of corporate affairs at Bio Foods Ltd, about how to rise as a woman in the corporate space. This is She Means Business, and I am your host, Claire Munde. Hi, Waithera.
Hey Claire, thank you for having me on She Means Business.
We're glad to have you on She Means Business. So today we just want to have a conversation around your career, the trajectory it has been, and the pitfalls and the journey that has been. So to start off with, I'd like you to take us through the pivotal moments in your career journey that have led you to be where you are today as the Group Corporate Affairs Director at Bio Foods.
I started off in banking. I did banking for 4 years. Immediately I left campus, and the only way I can describe it is that it was not a good personality fit for the disposition that I have. Banking is a very structured space, and you can imagine right now I'm 44. I started banking at 19. It was a very structured space. The processes were very, you can imagine at that point bankers' checks were being done on typewriters, travelers' checks. We still used travelers' checks. We didn't have debit cards. Only the very, very rich had debit cards, and that they were called diners cards at that time. So that was the banking world that I went into. And after 4 years, I realized that was not going to cut it. So immediately after that, I moved to media and marketing, advertising. I moved to Standard Media Group. And to say I had found my home does not even capture it. Immediately, honestly, my first day at Standard Media, I was so happy to be there because my background was in marketing. When I got into the advertising world, I was so happy to be there because it aligned with who I am. I was so excited. And a bit of a backstory, when I was young, when I was about like 6, 7 years old, I used to love watching the ads that used to show on VOK, then TV was called Voice of Kenya. And I loved the ad breaks in between because they were so, glamorous, so aspirational. And one day I was sitting with my dad and my aunt, and my aunt was commenting about something, and my dad said, and he was saying how these people who put ads in TV are so smart that everything that I see on TV, I want to buy. I stopped. You mean there are people whose jobs it is to put these things inside the TV? I'm telling you, at that point, I knew this is what I wanted to do. So when most people would ask kids, what do you want to be? You want to be a doctor? You want to be an engineer? I would say, I want to be the people who put ads inside the TV. Talk about manifestation. So at that point, now putting 2 and 2 together, I come into advertising. I'm selling advertising. I'm thriving in it. Like, I've come home, literally. So I did advertising for about 1 or 2, 3 years, and then I moved from sales now to marketing, which is what I had originally studied. I did quite well there, because by the time I left Standard Media Group, I was the head of marketing. So that was good times. So what is interesting at that point is when I turned 29, I told our then COO that I wanted to be a CEO by the time I turned 30. And yeah, he used to give me that look and he'd be like, what? Do you understand what it means to be a CEO? And I was so full of self-belief. I could not explain myself. I just knew I wanted to be a CEO. I want to run something big. And I kid you not. That's why I say the power of believing, with power of believing in God and the power of believing in your destiny. When I was 29, I used to work very closely with MSK, Marketing Society of Kenya. And then the CEO then was transitioning out of the position. So they gave me a call and they were like, hey, we know that you're very excited about the industry. You're very passionate, because I'm the kind of person who'd call the chairman all the time and say, you know what you guys need to do? Eh? You know when you guys are doing this, this is what you need to do. And it's like, instead of giving me so many suggestions, why don't you come and run the place? And I was like, what? As what? I just want to hear that title as CEO. Who am I? I jumped. I was so excited. I went and told my boss I'm resigning. He asked me to go where? I told him I've gotten a CEO position. was like, are you serious? I said, I'm so serious. And I'm telling you, my 30th birthday in February, I resigned, I served notice, I left on 31st of January. 1st of February, I celebrated my birthday at MSK. I turned 30 in MSK in the position I had manifested before. I'll tell you, this world is so interesting. So from MSK, I then went, I did my MBA. And one of the things that happened in my MBA is I started working on agribusiness projects. Actually, my project was on agribusiness. And the more I engaged in it, the more I fell in love again with agriculture. Also a bit of backstory. My parents are farmers in addition to business. And from a very young age, I loved being in the farm. And I loved being in the farm so much so that growing up, farming to me was fun. I told you TV used to start at 5 o'clock. There's nothing to do during the holidays until 5 o'clock. So I'd go, the cows are being milked, so I'm there with the cows being milked. I was just in the farm all the time. So to me, agriculture was never uncool. But when I went to high school, one of the things that happened is when everybody was choosing subjects, everybody was picking the posh subjects. So home science, technical drawing. Me, I've come with my kajembe. I'm like, no, I want to go to agriculture. And then, so what would happen is now the guys who come from shags, we used to call them district focus, were the only ones who are in agriculture. But me, I was like, this thing is so nice. You guys don't understand. You need to be here with me. So I've always loved agriculture. So once I was doing my MBA on agribusiness projects, I said, you know what? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. I love marketing and I love agriculture. What am I going to do? So I went into self-employment and I started helping farmers and to put together agricultural brands. So there's quite a number that are in the market in terms of coffee, helping them put together their route to market, helping them understand, because at that point there weren't very many what we call specialty brands, Kenyan brands on the shelf. So like, let's say Claire, you have a coffee farm and you want to put up a roaster. So we'd work together, we help you roast the coffee, then you put together, and then you have your own brand. So I've worked on quite a number of homegrown brands. And then from there, COVID happened. It was a very tough time. Being in self-employment was very, very tough. And so at some point I realized I have to be a bit more serious. I have to get a job because I have children. And luckily enough, I met the person who's my current boss. He's called Joachim Westervelt. He's a visionary in the food system space. And we had a conversation and he said, you know what, you're the kind of energy that we want. And I was able to join the team at that point.
Wow. Now, there are a number of things you've put up there that I want us to dive a little deeper into. Yeah. First of all, you said you wanted to be a CEO by 30. What was the appeal for that? Was it just like CEO, that's the ultimate thing that you want to become? Or what was the thinking behind that? Then there's something else. You know, you said you've turned 44. Sometimes for women, age, you know, they say that thing, a lady never says her age. What is it that makes you so comfortable, you know, talking about it? Because we live in a time that sometimes there's ageism, you know. So, you know, they say you grow, you're like fine wine, you're getting better with age, and there's something to be said about experience. But sometimes for women, it doesn't always work like that. So what are your thoughts on ageism and aging? And then also speak about what was that appeal about being a CEO. Then we'll dive deeper into other things.
I always tell people, when I turned 40, I said, guys, I've turned 40. And when I turned 44 at the beginning of this year, I said, one, I went and did a bit of research. And the year 44 is actually a year of transition. Even the meaning of the numbers, it's a year of transition. So I said, this year, I'm not going to live it like all the other years I've lived. I'm going to be very intentional in the things that I want to do, how to align my career. So I wrote down some of my goals. I even went and had a conversation with my boss and I said, this is the career direction I want to take. And he's the kind of person who believes in building a pipeline of leadership. So we had a conversation and said, if you want to transition into this space, I agree with you. You're more aligned now into policy. You want to grow into this space, I'll support you, but have a good succession, which I was able to do. Even in terms of my daughter, my child, I was very intentional. This is my year of 44. I want to achieve this, and I want you to sit down and write down all the things you want to achieve so that you can work on them together. So I'm not the kind of parent who will tell you, okay, now it's time to do this. We will do it together. So for me, every year it's not a time to complain and say, oh yeah, I've turned 44, I'm feeling older. I'm so excited I turned 44. What is this year going to produce for me? So I love my age. I'll tell anybody who asks what my age is. And I truly believe that as women, when we embrace our age, you find that we tend to bloom. We get into a season where when we learn to appreciate ourselves, we learn to appreciate everything that you're bringing to the table. I mean, age stops mattering. It just becomes about the impact that you're bringing to society and the impact you're having on your family.
So speak to us about that, what it meant to you to be a CEO at 30. Why?
So one of the things that I've always been, and I don't know where I got this, and sometimes I look at my parents, my late dad and my mom, and I always say, I think I got my drive from them. They're very driven in very different ways. But one of the things that I've always, so my dad was also a very big influence in my life. And one of the things when I was growing up is he'd always ask me, what is the difference between you and those people who own planes? What is the difference between you and those guys who own choppers? There's absolutely no difference. They have a brain, they've been taught, they have parents. Like what is significantly different? And once you have that mindset from a child that anything is possible for you, you dream in a way that is like there's no impossibility. If you talk to my team in the office, they'll tell you I literally worship at the gospel of audacity is my gospel. You know, if it can be done, we're going to do it. If you tell me it can't be done, I will make sure I find a way of doing it. So it's the way I was culturalized, and even when I was growing up, there was no wrong idea in our household. So if you say, I want to be a pilot, my dad say, yeah, you can be. You need to do your research, go and read about it. I want to be an astronaut, even though there is no space program in our country. My dad say, yes, that's a very, very good idea. Go and research and read on it. And what would happen is you then widen your scope because you've been told there's nothing that is impossible for you. So when I said at 29, I want to be a CEO, to me, it was not an impossible dream. It was like, now I've woken up and I think I can do this thing. And the opportunity presented itself, and I did it. I turned around the organization at that time. So I'm glad.
Now we'll talk a little bit about the food chain and everything like that. But you also spoke about having a set of goals at the beginning of this year, and it included your career. Now I want you to speak to women who are trying to climb up the corporate ladder or whichever space they are in business or whatever, and they want to get to a certain place, but they just don't know how to go about it. That school of audacity that you said, you went to your boss and said, you know, this is the trajectory I want to get to. So what does it take for me to get there? What are some of the tips you'd give for women who are trying to climb that ladder and they know where they want to get to, but sometimes they don't have that audacity to just go and step into their boss's office and say, you know what, I want to be CEO like in the next 2-3 years. And they think like, they look at you like, is that really going to work? Tell us those tips for having audacity and how to go about it as you work, as you said, because it doesn't just happen.
So I'm also a speaker on leadership, and I've spoken to very many women in different facets of life. And women wait, because of, I guess, our culture, women wait to be given. So even when you walk into a room, you'll never find a woman walk to the front seat. She'll want to sit on the second level, but never the first. And again, it goes back to the question of, okay, but who are those seats reserved for? Why is it that within your mind you've already limited what it is that you can be able to get? Yeah. So one of the things that you need to be is you need to accept that you're born for greatness. Yeah. And you should not have self-limiting beliefs. And whatever it is inside you that tells you you cannot, you need to understand where that voice came from and learn how to drown that voice. Yeah? Learn to believe in yourself. And so if you want to grow, the first thing is you need to work on the areas that you feel are your gaps. If you feel it's your image, you need to work on that. If it's your skills, your hard skills, you need to go back to school. If it's your soft skills, like what I was telling you, I'm learning the art of diplomacy right now. You need to work on them. You need to remove every excuse you could possibly have. Because once you remove it, you realize then I have nothing stopping me to get to where I need to go. The second thing is you cannot demand if you do not understand how the system works. Yeah? Understand the system within the organization you're in. How are people promoted? What is it extra that I need to work on? What projects give visibility? One of the things, I was reading this article and they were saying that women tend to work on busy work, not visible work. And busy work means that you're given projects, you're always working, you're always running, but you never get visibility with the CEO. You never get visibility in meetings because your work is the back work, but then the credit work is now handled by people who understand the system of visibility. So one of the things I always say is once or twice a year, you must work on a highly visible project, a project that will get you either the market is talking about you or even within the organization, they're able to understand that Claire was the lead in this project or Claire was part of the team, but she was a key driver in this project delivery. That's the second thing. The third thing is, one, you need to understand the season of life that you're in. We must evolve with seasons. So the way I behaved when I was 20, just starting off in my first job, is not the way I would have behaved at 30 when I was becoming CEO. So you need to understand every level demands a new you. And you need to, one of the things that I actually do is I study leaders. So I look at, like now I'm really going very heavily into the policy work as part of my job role, advocacy. And I look at women who work and excel at policy making. So I'll go and study, how do they dress? How do they speak? What mannerisms do they have? How do they carry themselves? And from there, I'm able to have some sort of North Star in terms of, if I want to excel in this particular space, this is the language of power that is used in this particular space. So these are some of the things that nobody really tells us, but we need to do that. So once you've understood the system, once you've updated your skills, you look the part, because it's not enough to just say, I want this particular thing. I also have to look like the role belongs to me. I've studied other leaders. I've understood the language that is used in that particular space, because the language of the boardroom is not the same as the language of just starting out in work. Yeah. So once you've understood the nuances, then from there, you should then put in your bid with courage. But putting in your bid is not just enough to say, I want the job. I have to be able to prove that I can do the job. And so I'll give you an example. So once I had done all of those things and I written in my vision board and I had now started upskilling, I went back to, at Bio I've always been in the director's position. So I started off in marketing as a marketing director, then I moved to strategic partnerships and the communications director, and now I've moved to group director, corporate affairs. And so I went and spoke to my boss, and my boss has got this thing. He says, you need to deserve it to earn it. Meaning that you need to start proving that you can do that job before I give you the job. You understand? So I started understanding this is what is done in the policy space, representing the organization in certain policy spaces, advocating for certain things that are required for the industry. And once you start showing that you are capable of doing the job, guess what happens? When you actually now bid for the job, you get the job. It becomes like an automatic, okay, you've earned it, you deserve it.
I like that. And let's just dive a little bit deeper into understanding the space that you work in. Yeah. You know, there's this debate about office politics and saying that, you know, the people who say like, oh, I'm not going to be part of the office politics, and then the others who say, you know, you can't pretend. I mean, it exists, and if you pretend it doesn't happen, then that is one of the reasons you'll never rise up. So how should a woman navigate office politics without getting muddied in that? And it just reminds me of there's a book my book club is currently reading, How Women Rise, and it's just like, you can't just pretend. I mean, you're good with your technical skills, but you exist in an ecosystem. So how does a woman navigate that and not get muddied in that, but at the same time be cognizant of your environment?
When you call it office politics, it sounds very toxic. So how I like putting it is, you need to, one, you remember what I told you about managing your system? You need to learn the system to manage the system. Two, you also need to question the intent behind managing the system. If I want to develop and grow, I need to progress my projects. Then I will be lobbying certain people and saying, by the time we're going to the board, or by the time we're going into this particular space, the exco, I need your support. And I'll have taken them through everything that I need to take them through. So that is not politics. That is understanding the system and using it to be able to create some sort of ownership and buy-in into what you're doing to progress the project. Yeah. So sometimes people say, no, you know, you're pulling allies, you're pulling cartels. No, you're working smart, because there's no point of going into the boardroom to argue at that point. By the time you're bringing a project into the boardroom, without having engaged other people on the table on what it is that you're doing, the answer will always be no. There'll always be a lot of pushback. So you have to learn to work smart to get ahead faster. Yeah. So learning to collaborate with your colleagues, that's not politics, that's smart business. Yeah. Learning how the organization is thinking. If this is a year of austerity, we're cutting back on certain things, then coming and saying, oh, I think we should all, you know, fly business class to wherever, is not gonna fly. So you need to also understand the mood of the business at that particular point, and present projects that align with wherever it is that you're going. If it's a period that the economy is doing well, the business is flush with cash, then you can present projects that are a bit more, you know, flashy. So understand the system, read the room that you're in, learn to lobby for what it is that you want, understand the language of power in each room, and learn to speak it well. Yeah. So those are some of the things that women need to learn to be able to grow. It's not politics, it's understanding the table you're seated on.
Yeah, I like that phrase, understanding the system. Yeah, very important. Now let's move to a discussion around agriculture. You said you are always into agriculture. There was the district focus group, but you found it cool. You were inside that district focus group. So tell us what it is like, the situation in Kenya when it comes to agriculture, because as much as there has been a move towards moving it from this uncool place to work or build your future in, how has it been for you working right within that space of agriculture and making sure that it actually gives a return that makes sense? So not just for older people, but even for younger people, how can you make it something that people actually say, you know what, I want to work within this space? Because you also worked with it within the space during the COVID time when you are self-employed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Agriculture is one of the most vibrant industries in this country, not even in this country, in this continent. So what is happening in terms of Africa? Africa is going through a transition where we're starting to understand the value of what we have. And you're seeing this, especially in the discourse online. You're seeing, you know, how countries are taking over their minerals and deciding that ownership of their land is very important. And agriculture is also going through that transition, because you're finding a lot of governments, including ours, has set agriculture as a key pillar of growth for their economies, right? And this realization happened especially around COVID, where food security, I mean, this was the one time the whole world literally agreed that food security is something that needs to be relooked at in a climate resilient way. So agriculture is in the spotlight. Yeah, so I love that about the industry, for starters. Secondly, agriculture is a very lucrative industry. I love the fact that also the language around agriculture is changing. Before, agriculture was always spoken about in terms of aid. Yeah, if you want funding, they talk about aid funding. But now they've realized that agriculture needs trade support, not aid support. And we're seeing that even the projects now that we're working on are very commercially oriented as an industry. It's becoming very vibrant. If you see the policies that are surrounding the agricultural space are now starting to become a bit more innovative and progressive. We're seeing tech coming and embedding within the industry. We're also seeing a lot of cascading of opportunities to the ground. We're seeing a lot of agribusiness value addition coming from smaller brands. So right now, if you go into the supermarket, I mean, you'll find sauces and jams and everything from local industry. So this is agriculture is an industry that has got low barriers to entry. Yeah. Why I love agriculture is, I told you that my mom farms. I have seen the impact of paying farmers well, how it changes their life, how it changes a community. The thing about a farmer is when you pay him well, he's not going to take the money out of the country. He's going to pay his debt at the kiosk. The kiosk owner is going to go to the wholesaler and buy, bigger quantity. So you find that when you support agriculture, you support communities to thrive. Yeah. What are the opportunities here right now? I mean, where do we start? There's tech. Yeah. Agriculture needs tech to support. Right now, we're having a lot of AI supporting agriculture because we need to be able to predict climate weather patterns. We need to be able to understand the trends in the market when there's drought, when there's, all that kind of stuff. So tech is very important, even in terms of route to market. We are seeing a lot of opportunities in supply chains. Yeah. Now it's not just about the farmers to the market. There's a lot of nodes coming in, these aggregators, what we traditionally call brokers. Now there are more aggregators coming into the market. There's more bulking stations coming into the market. We're seeing a lot of value addition that was traditionally not there. Before, it was all about export, export, export. Now it's also about how do we produce better for our people. So we're seeing a lot of brands coming into the market. Agriculture is also becoming quite high-end. We're seeing a lot of investment in large-scale agriculture, large-scale fodder production. So I mean, agriculture right now is one of the best industries to be in. Then there's also the element of storytelling. You're seeing now the conversations that are happening around agriculture and the growth. Like any other profession, let's make agriculture profitable. Yeah, and the more we show that it is profitable, the more we are seeing the youth come in, because the youth want money. Let's be honest, they want to work on something that has value, that creates impact in the community, but that at the end of the day, you're able to take your children to school. You're able to live with dignity, and that is the change that is happening in agriculture. We're starting to farm with dignity. We're starting to make agriculture make business sense.
Nice, nice, nice. Now let's talk about some of the pivotal times in your career. I'd like you to tell me what has been so far a career highlight for you and you just feel like, wow, this has been amazing. I mean, you've been in banking, strategic partnerships, marketing, corporate affairs throughout all these years. What is that one? I know there are many, but one standout moment and you're like, wow.
So when I left MSK, I was very excited about consultancy. I'm going to consult for agricultural brands and I'm going to work on communications and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I learned so fast is that when people are dealing with you, they're dealing with the institution. They're dealing with the office you hold and represent. They're dealing with a title. And when you leave, they will deal with the next person who holds that title and who holds that office. So for me, that was one of the, I don't say the hardest times in my life, because at that point I was struggling. I had left salaried income And in business, sometimes you make money, sometimes you don't make money. And even when you're starting off like from scratch. Well, let me tell you, in addition to that business, I did anything and everything I could possibly do. I was selling tomatoes from my boot. I was selling curtains from Italy. And then they started importing home. Like, I was just a jack of all trades, because business requires that you have, I don't call it the hustle, but it really is the hustle. So I did, as I was trying out to follow this dream of, you know, working on agriculture and value addition and communication, I needed to do a lot of things to be able just to keep my head above the water. And for me, it was a very, honestly, I think that's when I knew who God was. Not the God of my mom, the one who my mom used to pray for me, and I say, okay, I understood who God was. Because that struggle makes you realize that you need to hang on to someone who's bigger than you. So eventually we got the business going, and I mean, we consulted for quite a number of brands in the market. But just being able to realize that in case of anything, I can make it. That for me has been the biggest aha moment of my life. And it has given me also a built-in confidence. That is where my audacity comes from. Other than from my parents supporting me and speaking life into me when I was very young, is just understanding that I can make it. So that for me was the biggest aha moment in my life, in my professional life.
Yeah, and when you say that people deal with the title, and when you leave, they will deal with the next person who has that title, unpack that for us a bit.
So there's this article Bitange wrote some time back, and he said, when you leave a particular office, you will look at your phone and check whether it's actually working, because it will stop ringing. The invitations to dinners and whatever will stop completely, because what happens is society does not like risky individuals. So the transition for most people from employment to self-employment usually is very difficult, especially if you think people are going to deal with you in the same way. But the beauty of it is, in that period, you're also able to understand yourself. When you discover who you are truly, you understand the people who are around you truly and who will always have your back. And that period also helps to build a circle of people who you can ultimately depend on. And you don't get mad, because you understand, I mean, it's business. People are doing what is right for them by working with the office holder. But now you learn to do what is right for you and make sure that the people you have around you, the network you have around you, is progressive and is invested in you as much as you're invested in them. Interesting.
So you're saying the brand is Waithera, your brand Waithera, and you're the asset. And I ask some of the She Means Business guests this question. If you describe yourself, how would you describe yourself, that so-called elevator pitch? Who is Waithera?
Waithera is first and foremost God's chosen. Because when I look at my life, when I look back at the things I've done, sometimes I even wonder, am I serious? You know, how did I get this done? So I literally say I'm God's chosen. And in the beginning, I was God's chosen because my mother prayed for me. But at some point, I realized that God loves me and I need to serve him in everything that I do. So I'm God's chosen. I look at my work as a testimony of what I can do in this world, to show how much, you know, I value and appreciate what he has given me. So for me, my work is not just a career. It's my worship. It's how I say thank you for giving me this chance. I'm a parent. I have an amazing 17-year-old who's very smart, who's very funny, who's very driven. In fact, sometimes I tell people, oh my God, my daughter's work ethic she's so driven. Then I remember myself at 29 saying, I want to be a CEO. So I said, okay, you know, I have to give her space. I am an advocate of agriculture. I use my voice to make this continent better. I am so excited and so passionate about what it is that we can do to change this country. I see these opportunities every day when I go to the ground, and I hope that my work will create a legacy that makes this country better.
Awesome. I like it. And you've talked about being a parent and your daughter. I've seen you at a couple of events and you've tagged her along, and you seem to be like molding her to be that leader that she is. Tell us about what your parenting journey has been like and how important it is to instill those values of hard work and just building the leadership that is inside your daughter. So
to be able to explain how I parent, I will have to tell you a story about my childhood. So when I was young, I told you TV started at 5. Always remember, all my stories start with TV started at 5, yeah? So there's really nothing to do during the day. And back in the day, it wasn't like how people go out as much. House parties and people coming to your house was the way things were done. And so my dad's friends would come over on a Saturday or a Sunday, and he would buy all the newspapers. He'd buy The Nation, The Standard, Taifa Leo, all of those newspapers. And at around 6 or 7, when he learned that my English was quite good, he'd give me the newspapers, and I'd literally sit down like a radio. I'd be given a seat, and his friends are there, they're roasting meat, and I'm given the newspaper and I'm told, read the first page. Today, President did this. Go to this other page, and I read the story, and I'd sit there for like an hour or two just reading, and they're listening to me, and then they're talking, they listen. And what would happen afterwards is maybe I finish reading the Standard, and they're chatting about this thing, and then one would say, yeah, but this, and I'd say, no. Then my dad would say, no, listen to her, she's the one who read the newspaper. And I'm a whole 7-year-old at that point. And I'd say, I read, the president went, and he said, and it's even over here. And they say, oh, yeah. So what would happen is, at a very young age, I understood the value of my voice. And I understood that if I understood the content, my voice mattered. Yeah? So I think from there, that's when I started becoming very academic, because I would read a lot knowing that what I have read and what I have understood is what is going to empower my voice. 2, my dad was very honest. He'd say, like, he'd be sitting around with his friends, and I'd say, oh, so-and-so has bought this car. And I'd say, oh, this car is so nice. He'd ask me, ask him, how did he get the car? How did he make money? Do you want to go and see the car? I'd say yes, and I'd enter the car and look and ask, how does this work, and all that kind of stuff. But what it did is it developed a comfort level for me. So I could meet other leaders, and I don't feel, that, how do I put it? I don't feel intimidated, because at a young age I was told, ask the question, ask where the money comes from, ask him what he does. And I would ask those kind of questions. So even when I started working, and I later on came to realize that I would just be very bold in the way I speak. But it's because of the way I was nurtured, yeah? And that helped me very much in my career, because I was always able to ask for what I wanted. And I was always able to speak in forums without feeling shy about who I am and what it is I represent, yeah? And if I make a mistake, it's okay. Human beings make mistakes. I won't say that the next time. And because of that, I realized it has also helped me very much in my career. Knowing that, I have a daughter who wants to be a global citizen. It is my duty to intentionally parent her for the journey that she's going to take. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I read a lot, and I was reading up on some of these elite schools globally, where these billionaires take their children, and they're saying it's not so much the education, it's the way they mold them to become leaders from a young age. Yeah, so they're taught geography, they're taught about geopolitics, they're taught about things that ordinarily children are not incorporated into. So once I learned that, I said, okay, so I watch documentaries with my child. We talk about World War II, we talk about history, and then we even talk about, the other day we were watching a Dictator's Playbook with her, and I was telling her, do you see, the world, there's nothing new under the sun. The playbook is always the same. And once you start teaching your child to think in a certain way, then you're equipping them for a world that when you're not there standing with them on a day-to-day basis, I cannot work with my child into their job. Yeah, she will have to do it by herself. I cannot work with my child. I cannot be with my child in campus. All I can do is teach her my values. So I work with her into spaces so that she can learn from other women. And they will speak about their journey in their careers, how they started. And let me tell you, representation is so important. Because when she sees people who look like her, who speak like her, who come from, who come from her country, then she says, if they can do it, what's the difference between me and them? And it goes back to my dad. What is the difference between you and these people who own planes? There's nothing. And I asked her that question today. The same question I was asked, what is the difference between you and this lady? And afterwards, sometimes I leave her and you'll find her going and talking to some speaker. And she's asked them about their life. What do they do? How did they get there? I remember there was one event I actually went and they said, oh yeah, your personal assistant was here. I said, that's not my personal assistant. That's my daughter. Yeah. And she's not even of working age. At that point, she was 15. Yeah. So if you teach them, even the Bible says, mold them the way they are meant to be. So I mold her in the way I best possibly can.
So now as we start to wrap up, let's talk a bit about executive presence. You look good, first of all. You look very good. And maybe you can tell us what you're wearing, because I've seen you in a couple of events and you always come put together. So tell us, you spoke about, you need to look also the part. So speak about your clothing, how it represents who you are.
So I'm quite a creative individual, though I'm in corporate, and I love fashion. And this is something that I got from my mom because my mom loves fashion. One of the things I do very, very intentionally is I strive to wear 90% Kenyan designers. So, for example, I know I don't want to advertise, but this is, I'm wearing head-to-toe Monica Canary. And why I do that is because it's not enough to say what we must do for Africa or for our country. We must also actively, like I actively source homegrown food. Yeah, I love supporting Kenyan brands. In terms of what I wear, I love working with Kenyan designers because they're very creative. I mean, they're the best of the best. And when you actually compare the quality of what you'd get from a Kenyan designer compared to maybe something that was imported, you'd realize this is something that was made for you by hands that are hands like yours. Yeah. And also I like supporting the local economy. Yeah. I believe that Kenyan design is one of the best in the world. And once you start understanding that is, even the stories behind it, even the families that you're supporting, I mean, I love Kenyan. To me, this is part of who I am. And I love wearing Kenyan designers.
Awesome, awesome. Now, as we wrap up, I'd like us to do a quick fire round. What are you currently reading?
Oh, I'm reading 2 books. So I'm reading The Theory of Capital by Pierre Bourdieu. It's a history book about the value of different capitals in the market. I'm also reading this book that I was referred to by my boss, Annie Duke. It's called The Art of the Bet. What it is, I can check it online. But it's about learning how to negotiate, and she gives you examples from poker. So I'm reading those 2 books, but I'm also reading other books because of my book club. Yeah.
Okay. What are you currently listening to?
I don't know what is going on, but I am actually starting to listen to a lot of music from the 90s. Sorry, the music today I find is so crass sometimes. So I'm going back. I don't know, it's nostalgia. So what am I listening to right now? I'm listening to Boys to Men.
The ballads, okay. Yeah. Okay, nice. Now, as we wrap up, I'd like you to look into this camera and speak to that woman who is just trying to rise up or trying to discover herself and become the best version of herself that she can be. What is that one piece of advice that you would give her?
So the advice I'd give you is this. 1, discover the strength of your voice. 2, be very audacious. There's nothing that you cannot do. If you believe you can, you're right. If you believe you can't, you're also right. 3, reinvent yourself. The beauty of a woman is she's like a butterfly. She goes through different seasons in her life. So if you've gone through whatever you've gone through, take time out, cocoon, come out as a butterfly. Last but not least, don't be afraid to pivot. You don't have to do one thing your whole life. You can start off in banking, go into media, go into advertising, end up in agriculture. So long as you're doing what makes your heart sing, you have conviction, you have passion, I'm telling you, the world is your oyster.
Awesome. You have heard it from Waithera Ng'ang'a, the Corporate Affairs Director at Bio Foods. Be audacious and don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. The world is your oyster. This has been She Means Business. I have been your host, Claire Munde. Until next time, have a good one.